Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. session of the 2022 OpenSimulator Community Conference. In this session, we are pleased to introduce the presentation OpenSim-NGC, an OpenSim for Trusted Grids. Our speaker is Michael Dickson, aka Mike Chase. Mike provides development support for the Utopia Sky grid, operating since 2018, and is leading the OpenSimulator NGC project. Please check out the website found at conference.opensimulator.org for speaker bios, details of sessions, and the full schedule of events. The session is being live streamed and recorded, so if you have questions or comments during the session, you may send tweets to @OpenSimCC with the hashtag OSCC22. Welcome, everyone. Let's begin the session.
Thank you so much for the introduction. And I also want to thank Avicon and all the work that's gone into this conference. It's really a remarkable facility for all the OpenSim efforts, a way to come together and kind of share what we're doing. I'm here today to talk about the OpenSim-NGC project, which I lead, and an effort that we're doing called the Trusted Hypergrid. And this really is meant to be high level and more of an introduction. There's a great deal of information on the website that we host, and also in a Discord server that we manage and use for our communications. But I'm going to cover these two projects and then a quick summary to wrap up with some information about how you can contact us. OpenSim-NGC is a group of people that have come together to build a better OpenSim. Not that we're not so much trying to change code, at least in the current incarnation of the project, but we're trying to add a layer of continuous integration and testing on top of it, and provide a kind of hardened version of the platform, if you will, so that we can roll those out to our grid, the grids that we manage and that we are working on together. There's a couple of things that have been done with the project over and above core OpenSim. There's two main branches that are in use. The maintenance branch, which is primarily OpenSim core as you know it, with the Globit module and a few other things layered into that and built in, so that somebody doesn't have to add those things after the fact. And then the main development version, which I'll talk about in a little bit, which is really much more focused on the future. That's the next generation part. So what we do now is we use GitHub extensively with a great deal of the CI process, the continuous integration process that it provides. There are, every time a commit happens, a build takes place. There is security scanning and quality scanning that happens. I was pleased, by the way, to note that some of those practices have been picked up on core as well. That was great to see. I'm a strong believer in a development process that provides quality through the kinds of scanning and code quality that's baked in, if you will, because of the process that's being used. We have a mechanism where people do code commits on branches, and those get reviewed and merged down into the main integration branch, and then that makes a release at some point. So a lot of what we're doing with the main project, the maintenance part of this, is really just adding some continuous integration and testing on top of core OpenSim. The other area, and probably the one that's more interesting for the future, is the next generation part. And this is based on the fact that really OpenSim has been around for quite a while, and it was built. There was a not invented here is the wrong way to put it. There was a container invented as a way to pull modules in and actually manage all of the pieces that make up an OpenSim, make it configurable, called Robust, which many of you are familiar with. It was a great idea at the time, but the implementation is unfortunately dated. And I think it's holding back leveraging current technology enhancements in C# and .NET. So what we're doing is we're building around .NET 6. The application is using dependency injection and the default hosting container that is provided by .NET. And we're moving the database access, for instance, to EF Core. Everything is built from the start to be containerized via Docker if that's desired. You don't have to, but there's a microservices focus to all of the pieces, and everything is async from the top all the way down to the bottom. So that really what we're doing is a new architecture. This part of the project represents a fork from OpenSim in the sense that we're really looking at a different architecture in terms of how this is built. But I think that's important, and I think that our goal is to be able to come up with an architecture that allows growing room and a great deal of flexibility in the future. The status of that, the maintenance release is the piece I mentioned first. That's the part that's tied closely to core. That's under current release. There's versions on the website you can grab, and about at least 5 grids that I know of that run it, and more people that are kicking the tires and looking at it. I hope it's okay to say this, but it was used for the OpenSim Fest, and I'm not aware of any major problems that occurred with that, and not that that's just due to the software. In fact, it's largely due to the team that ran it. But I think that it's definitely being used in a number of different installations. This new effort is focused on code scanning and driving the changes that come up based on that to drive quality into the code. So we run a build every time the code is committed. There is quality scanning that takes place. There's 430,000 lines of code that were scanned, 5,000 alerts produced. Of those, 9 are critical security alerts, and those are actively being investigated. 2 are high alerts, basically potentially SQL injection and those kinds of issues. The rest are potentially what the program is flagging as poor quality coding or error-prone coding, precision issues, and things like that. So there's plenty to address out of that effort, and it's a priority. It's one of the major things that we're doing in addition to the architectural changes. So all of this is basically in part to build what we hope is a better OpenSim experience, and a big part of that, and a lot of the team members feel strongly about this, is captured in what we call the Trusted Hypergrid. So the Trusted Hypergrid is an effort to take and build kind of a layer on top of the regular hypergrid, and in doing that, build a sense of community where people know what level of trust exists between the pieces. It's not so much technology, although the effort is going to inform the development of technology, because we're going to produce tools and things to help implement and support this. But there was traditionally a distinction made between what we would call a walled garden. So the idea was it's safer if you have this walled garden environment, because people, the code and the objects and everything else stays in that environment. Whereas the hypergrid, of course, you want to be able to travel and move around. And so this is extending that kind of somewhere in the middle. So it's basically to say, if we have a set of principles and requirements that we understand and we agree on, we can allow some amount of travel and IP protection to take place. So one of the things I don't want to do with this talk is get into a heavy-duty debate about IP protection and intellectual property issues. That's actually an interesting topic, but not the primary thing I care about with this. What we care about is making sure that the platform supports and enables the ability to manage intellectual property issues. So what we're doing is building those kinds of things into the environment. It's an effort first through policy and then through technology to derive a version of OpenSim that behaves consistently with and respects the intellectual property of the people that are users. Trust is about relationships first and foremost, and really what we're doing is we're building a community web of trust that allows us to all have and work together and play together and do the kinds of things we want to do within our OpenSim environments. So there's a lot of different trust relationships that are captured in a virtual world. The grid has a relationship to their home grid. Grid owners and do to other grid owners, of course, and the resident does to the other grids transitively through that. If the resident is a merchant, they might have a relationship with a currency provider that allows them to sell and cash out, and the grid owner potentially participates in that. And customers have relationships with content creators by using the goods that the content creators have created, whether that's done because a transaction took place with money or it's a free transaction and the objects are being distributed freely. Those things are important, and the relationships have to exist. So residents often choose a trusted grid, trust a closed grid, because that trust relationship is better defined. It's a closed environment and you know all the players. What we're looking to do is develop a sense of requirements and the agreements that allow all these grids to interoperate. And we get to those things through clearly defining what membership in a trusted grid means, and for grid owners and content creators, and do that through things like terms of service and so on. So this is essentially, I mean, it's a picture that shows the kinds of things. We're building a community. We want people to be connected and be able to interact, but we want it to be able to happen because trust relationships exist. And I know what each of the players that I'm involved with is providing. So in a quick definition, ultimately, this isn't about technology, it's about policy, and we will be able to do technology to help with this, things like manage assets and inventory and access lists and blocking things that are traditionally thought of as far as internet security, and also to provide audit logs that allow us to document the transactions that happen. But foremost, this is about people and how people interact. So what this boils down to is a simple set of requirements. As a grid owner, I want to be able to form collaborative relationships with other grid owners. I want to reduce my risk. So I'm hosting content on behalf of users, and there are rules about how intellectual property is handled in the US and EU and other countries that I have to be aware of, at least, and support. And well, for good or ill, the hosting side is becoming more complex, not simpler. I know many of you have probably heard of a DMCA process, for instance. That's an American thing, a US thing. The EU and other countries have similar approaches. These things are different, and because we're running a virtual environment where we have residents potentially in multiple countries, it isn't so simple how that's done. So to comply, we want to have these kinds of tools that make it easy to block individuals from uploading content as the need arises. And that's going to get eventually to things like watermarking and being able to identify and prove provenance on things. And we want there to be a way to identify the creator of the original content and the connections that exist between licenses that allow that content to be used. So all of this is really from a grid owner's perspective, their responsibilities in terms of running and managing the content that they host. As a content creator, I want to be able to upload my creations with the ability to document the provenance. I want to be able to say, these are the licenses that apply to these things. This is the rights that come along with it, and so on, and be able to identify the elements that represent my unique intellectual property, because I want specifically to be able to protect that. We also be able to want to report possible infringement when an improper use is noted, and that's the kind of thing that should be communicated to other grids that are participating in this trusted hypergrid, because they have a potential that abuse could potentially be seen at another grid location. I want to be able to defend my intellectual property rights when required and have the ability to document those things as I work them. And I want to make my intellectual property available to customers using a permission system that identifies how it can be used, including whether it can be exported off grid. This is not an exhaustive list, by the way. It's simply an attempt to kind of start to put down a set of requirements from the perspective of the people that are involved. And finally, as a grid user, I want to be able to know that content is legitimate. I want to understand the licenses involved and how I can use content that I have access to. I want to go back to the first one. I have heard so many times from users on our grid, for instance, that they don't know if something has been botted or not, whether it's stolen. Excuse me. So this in particular is important, that there should be a way to know for sure that where you got something from had the right to distribute it. And so that's a major goal. And we also want the user to be able to understand licenses involved and how they can use the content they have access to know whether an item is allowed to leave the grid. The export flag is a part of that, and to create your next masterpiece, knowing that the content is safe and secure and usable without unacceptable restrictions. So just to sum up, and then I'll take a few questions if I can. This is a project trying to update the OpenSim platform to provide consistency and a high degree of performance, while also implementing data integrity and security we don't currently experience. Our goal is to make changes to support the architecture of the platform so that we can deliver an experience where intellectual property protection and security and the kinds of things that are important for somebody to be able to live within this virtual world we're all sharing, make it a positive experience. You can learn about our efforts through the GitHub project page, which will be in the links. I'll post a link in chat as well. And we also have a Discord server that you can join if you're interested. And finally, if you'd like to drop me an email, I'd be more than happy to discuss the project with you as well. All right, so that's I'll leave the summary up. That's the main thing I wanted to talk about. If there's a time, I can take a few questions.
Yeah, sounds like looks like we have a couple of minutes. As I am curious as to, I know you said this was a summary, and for those of us who are, I don't know that I'm a landlubber, but I'm a secondary user, meaning that I would be the content creator rather than actually putting, something together or contributing perhaps on GitHub. What is it that I could do perhaps to get involved for someone who's more of the end user rather than the developer?
That's a great question. So in the Discord, we have areas that are specifically focused on developer discussions, but there's a general chat area as well. And as I said, a large part of this effort is actually just developing a clear, concise set of requirements that are usable to define what we mean when we say trusted grid. Those things should then inform the tools that get developed. So content creators, just end users, are are all welcome in this Discord if you'd like to join, or if you want to go to the GitHub. There's places where you can post comments and so on as well. Because we want to hear about the kinds of things that people feel we need to address. We have at least a sense of it from running our own grids, but as a content creator, people might have specific needs or requirements that we haven't thought of. So I'd love to be able to capture that as well.
Great, because sometimes there's projects that are going on that are so interesting, and yet they're just in the development stage. And for someone, doesn't write code, not very much of it anyway, it's really great to know that there's something that we can do to help. Let's see if there's any more questions. We have about a minute left. There was a question about security standards, but I think you actually addressed those in basically talking about the IP is kind of a different topic. But here's a question from, I think, Nick's Breen. It says, will this program go retroactively with all content on a grid or items grandfathered in it?
So that's a good question too. Yeah, certainly we can provide within the limits of what's possible with the permission system that we're all familiar with, the copy mod transfer. We can provide some amount of security, and if cases are identified where something is clearly infringing someone's copyright or intellectual property, we can take action and share that action with the rest of the people that are in the trusted grid. So there are some things we can do retroactively, absolutely. But my hope is also that going forward, along with the things that are going on with GLTF and some of the other stuff, which actually also help improve the way assets are managed, we can do more, I think, looking forward. And that's partially the reason why we're doing this project right now, is that there's an opportunity. I think we're at an inflection point where there's some real new change happening in the space, and we would like to be able to be looking at how those things could be integrated back into OpenSim so we can take advantage of them.
Okay, well, it looks like we're out of time. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for an informative and very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
As a reminder to our audience, you will want to check out conference.opensimulator.org to see what's coming up on the conference schedule. You won't want to miss our next session, which will begin at 3:30 p.m. in this keynote region after a 30-minute break. It is entitled Using 3D Environments for Soft Skills Training. Also, we encourage you to visit the OSCC22 Poster Expo in the OSCC Expo 3 region to find accompanying information on presentations and explore the Hypergrid resources in OSCC Expo 2 region, along with sponsor and crowdfunder booths located throughout all of the OSCC Expo regions. Thank you again to our speaker and the audience.